Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Hunter Biden foot job video of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka I would have reviewed your record, but my fibromyalgia was acting up that day.
And I'm the black metal guy, aka engorging the Cathedral of Dankness. I think that's my nod to you. That's a brutal death metal song title.
That could be. I've written stuff not too dissimilar from that. Engorging the Cathedral. Actually, one of my best ones that I still never got to use was Irrimate the Pious. It was just going to be about throat-fucking nuns to death, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's a fairly standard subject matter at this point, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's fairly standard, but
it's your own take on a traditional genre.
Yeah,
also,
it is.
YouTube, we mean fictionally throat fucking nuns to death.
Well, I don't have access to many in my everyday life, so I mean, what am I gonna? Where are you gonna find a nun? Where am I gonna find a convent? You know.
Second of all, where are you gonna find the kind of nuns they have on the cover of black metal records? They haven't made nuns like that since harlots were forced into convents, right?
Yeah. I mean, I got to go back to all those awesome 70s through early 90s nuns gone astray movies. I should definitely create a little list of those for the listeners at one point.
All right, well, this is definitely... I feel like that's definitely the most NC-17 intro we've had of all time. So now, guys, I hope you're ready for this salacious and sensual episode of Terminus, where we give in to our basest desires.
Terminus after dark, as Lonesome Spirit said one time.
True. Yeah.
All right, so episode 38. And Black Metal Guy, what do we have in the greater Terminus co-prosperity sphere today?
Well, on Instagram, I talk a lot with the guys from Rat King Records, which is an outfit in the UK, who've sort of shifted gears from putting on shows and stuff towards doing a more concerted push towards labeldom. And we did a new segment a while ago on a Icelandic dungeon synthy kind of project that they released that was pretty interesting. That was that weird kind of Death Dwarf stuff. Mm-hmm. Morkensalmar by Diflitza.
Yeah.
And this time, and so they've got a big set of releases now. Coming up, there's an album called Labascation by Carcinoma. And that's pretty interesting stuff. That's sort of a take on this kind of highly modern, orthodox and hardcore and caverncore kind of influenced stuff that we're seeing. They did a split with that band Abyssal that you brought on the show.
Abyssal?
And
I mean, I've never brought Abyssal on the show.
Wait, sorry, I'm confusing my sort of generic arty black metal band names. What was the one? I think they did a split with Hatto Pelagial. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm confusing them with Abyssal.
God damn it! What was their name again? It was. I got it in front of me. Thoribos.
No. Okay, never mind. And no. Let's see. No, and Carcinoma. Whatever. This was all misinformation. Forget what I just said. It must have been someone else on the label. Delete that from your brain. Anyway, interesting band.
It is Abyssal. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting band called Carcinoma coming up, and we will be reviewing that. That is out in the middle of the month. And right now, they've got a sort of teaser kind of single by a band called Trivax, Trivax. Trivax has apparently been around a long time and was founded in Iran back in the day. Iran, I guess. And they've put out, since 2009. But the guy has been based in London for a long time. Or Birmingham, sorry. Ugh, God. in
you're fucking
England.
up today, buddy.
Yeah, we're recording later at night in Birmingham for a long time, and this is what I get for not having my note window open in front of me. And it's I haven't heard their stuff up till now, but there's been a 4-year silence, right, or a 5-year silence. The last record was Sin in 2016. So this is kind of like, I suppose, a reboot, right? And let's just, as a sort of cue, I'd say this is an interesting attempt at filling the kind of niche left behind by bands like Watain for sort of like, I'm thinking back to like Cassis Luciferi, for bands that did sort of like big arena scale black metal that was still recognizably black metal, or recognizably extreme metal or whatever. We'll see how that works in the post-COVID concert environment, right? But you can tell that these guys are a highly rehearsed band that wants to play live, right, and wants to tour. So this is from that big long track, Into the Void, about a minute in. Let's go. Death metal guy.
I think you're pretty on the money, at least in what you said in the notes, where it does seem like an attempt to fit some of these distinctively orthodox kind of musical techniques into a sort of pop metal framework. And surprisingly, it works pretty well. Like, maybe it's like a more logical place for some of those techniques to be. These very, you described it as kind of inorganic ideas that find themselves a little bit more comfortable within the clearly constructed kind of nature of a more popular style of music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, you could. I see this. Yes, I think this is a good development of, if you look back, of the Orthodox sound. If you look back at the sort of Swedish and French Orthodox sound in the late aughts, early teens, right? You can see it branching. The biggest continuation of that has been the Icelandic scene, right? And those guys, they've got spirit, they've got high energy shows. You can say a lot for them, but I've
music is
never
mostly
thought
bad.
those bands have. Yeah, they don't really they were maybe too proficient for their own good when they started, and they didn't wrap. It has taken them a very long time to wrap their ears around melody, and I don't mean melody in the sense of like, flowery melody. I mean just like riff shapes, right? It's tended towards this kind of shapeless, abrasive, skronk music, right? And they're moving in the right direction, but it's taking a long time. So seems like it's appealing to the same set of people. It's got that same guitar tone, right? Yeah, that same kind of inorganic, crystalline, shimmering guitar tone that way back in the day comes from post-hardcore. But yeah, it's got this really, it's guided by these melodic ideas, proper like chord changes, and to me it really sounds like Dissection under the surface. Halfway between the ballady parts of Storm of the Light's Bane and the legendary final album.
Well, it also sounds a lot like Late Immortal in a way.
I hear that for sure. Yeah. So it's sort of like, a thing would be that the Icelandic style stuff comes on as this very abrasive kind of highly extreme, inaccessible music, but it functions as arena black metal.
Mm-hmm.
That's, it has this sort of cool guy leather jacket image. It's quite popular with the press. It's all over, it has this big booming sound, right? This band is sort of writing music specifically for that context. And as far as the Dissection thing also, like, I think it even comes down to the name, like Trivax. Anytime I see Dissection used all this, right? They were into this sort of anti-cosmic mysticism. They invoked a lot of Hindu or kind of Eastern stuff. This imagery of a trident comes up again and again. Mm-hmm. And a lot of, like, there's that band Trident, right? Which shares a member with Dissection.
And Watain was always using the tridents on their stuff.
Exactly. So I think this is very much in that vein. And I was thinking that it's about as close as you can get to a literal musical cult. Like, in a cool way. Like, John... Like, if you think about, like, somebody like Burzum, right, has always had a fairly coherent ideological bent to it. And it's influenced a ton of bands, right? But not in the same way. Like, whereas, like, Dissection has, like, followers. Like, people who are working in his spiritual tradition and basically using the same symbols.
Yeah.
We also got some cool lyrics, which I can get behind. There's some stuff in, I think, Hindi or whatever variant of Indian language. But cool line in this, in total detachment, I let the forces flow through me, into me, and from me, for the I is no longer there, but ecstasy and power in total death.
Oh, that just sounds like Dissection lyrics, so...
That's true, yeah. So yeah, I think this is promising and interesting, and I think in terms of what I would like to see at a large venue, this is promising. Also, I would say that this song is very long, and on the back end, it does something that both you and I would consider highly objectionable. But then, not just in spite, but almost because of it, pulls it out in a really kind of cool way that I don't want to give away. But so there's a lot happens in this song, and it was really the very last part of it that sold me.
All right. Yeah, no, it sounded pretty cool. I'll check that out, definitely on my own time. So, real quick, before we get on to our roundup for the day, as usual, the best way to stay in touch with us and develop your parasocial relationship with the podcast known as Terminus is by following us on social media. You can follow me, the Death Metal Guy, on Facebook over at Terminus Podcast, or on Instagram, following the Black Metal Guy at Terminus Extreme Metal. Additionally, if you're truly dedicated to the cause of us destroying music journalism forever in a great plume of nuclear fire, you can donate to that process by following us on either Patreon or, if you're a real weirdo with a Proton Mail account, Subscribestar. $3 and up gives you access to all of the Terminus Prime bonus episodes, and $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server where we discuss the sissy of Fremont Street and our favorite absurd bangers from yesteryear. Damn, I'm getting good. I'm getting better at this every single time, man. God,
that was pretty good. Yeah, you really, yeah. At this point, you just sort of random generate these phrases, and they're all on the money.
Oh yeah. No, I just as I'm rattling it off, I always just remember. Okay, so what's the last couple things I remember from the Discord server? How do I make fun of our fans again? Et cetera, et cetera. So.
The death metal guy, the Lil Wayne of extreme metal podcast intros.
The Carter 3 and earlier only, please. Cool records this week. Very cool ones, and you've got the opening pair. What have you got?
Yeah, I think this is a big show. These are all pretty fucking cool. And we've got pretty distinct first and second halves of the show. I'm bringing in the first half. The death metal guy's bringing in the second half. First half, I would say, is two important statements in the sort of finally coalescing American black metal sound. So, first we've got Father of Death by Elegiac, out on his own label, Sacrificial Sounds. Elegiac's been a wildly prolific project, and then went silent for a year, which signaled to me that there was something big coming. And I think this is a pretty substantial work. So, Elegiac also is like, you could describe, we'll get into it more, but generally, if you like kind of epic, bashing, Bathorian, frontier majesty, you will enjoy this. As far as Silvanthrone, a younger band from Pennsylvania, and they've had an EP before this that was really good, but this is their debut full-length, on the shorter side, called Forgotten Pathways to Ancient Wisdom, out on the, pretty influential label Nihilistic Noise Propaganda. They've done a lot in the last year or two. Silvanthrone, I suppose, plays what people call melodic black metal now. Basically they play black metal, and it's highly influenced by various things from France. But it has this kind of has a distinctly American energy that makes it more than just vampire worship. So we'll get into that later too. And those are both records I've wanted to cover these bands for a long time, so I'm stoked. Death metal guy, what do you have?
All right, it's time for the first ultra weird record of the year, and in this case, it is going to be the new EP by Astral called Degradation of Human Consciousness over on Blood Harvest. Astral also a fairly new band out of California, I believe. And Blood Harvest, to anyone familiar, is a stalwart Swedish label that specializes in old school death metal and kind of like weird odds and ends from different parts of the metal spectrum, but always with kind of an old school flair. And I think they're one of the only distros that still has copies of a bunch of my old tapes still for sale. So
nice.
Now the hunt is on to figure out what band I was in. All right, and last one, just an out of nowhere rant.
Second really weird record of the year.
Yeah, I guess this is really weird. It's not quite as obviously super weird though. But totally random find that ended up magical. The 8th, yes, I said that right, the 8th full-length record by Devilgroth entitled Svyatogor. One of probably 100 records named Svyatogor that I've listened to, but this one's really worthwhile. And this one is released, I believe, independently on Bandcamp, on CD or maybe vinyl through Werewolf promotion out of Poland, and also on cassette by a very new label from the US called Nebula Aeterna Productions. So definitely excited. Yeah, definitely excited to be talking about this one, because it's we'll get to it, but I think that this Devilgroth record is going to be a very important one for our listeners this year. All right, so first up, we've got Elegiac. I'm going to trust your pronunciation on that, with Father of Death. And this is a weird case where I think that I'm like a friend of Elegiac through like 4 different bands or something, but I haven't listened to that much of it myself. Yeah, so give people some background on him.
Well, that makes me a friend of a friend of a friend. So I say it Elegiac with a kind of soft G, but who knows, man? I think yours sounded fine too. Let's just do our own takes. Yeah, so this is a band that I've referenced before on this show as an example of black metal that really sounds American. And it's a band I've been keeping my eye on for a long time. It's been one of these sort of super prolific one-man projects where I think he sort of started out coming from a hardcore background years and years ago, but gradually like fully committed to the BM thing. And he he's been sort of honing his skills. He uses each new release to explore new techniques and ideas. That's what he was doing at the time. So it started evolving towards this like very robust, manly American heathen black metal. But along the way, he was basically putting out record after record, and it was kind of like he was doing these experimental releases in public. And so it meant that it was kind of a singles band. Like, on each record, there would be like a few songs that were massive bangers. And then others that were kind of, let's say, high energy, but not terribly memorable. Right? Mm-hmm. You know, you get some of your favorite stock Darkthrone riffs. But yeah, so it was this kind of project that was developing, and I think lately, in the last 2 years, I think it's really started to gel. First, let's play a sample of older by now Elegiac. This is Rise from the Ashes from the record. I think it's an EP of the same name. And you will hear a good example of his older sound. So, that's a banger, is it not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just pretty much all the stuff I like in one place, you know?
Yeah, man, yeah. So you get one of those sort of massive Satanic War Master type, early Satanic War Master type riff, and then just basically it starts working like a hardcore song. And it's very honest, very transparent and honest about that influence, and embraces it and says, why not this in black metal? In the same way that I feel like Commodus has been doing that lately, but this guy was doing it quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I would almost say that that's something we're seeing as a sort of inherent part of this new breed of American black metal, or whatever terminology we're going to start ascribing to it, which is hardcore songs made out of black metal parts, in a way.
Or vice versa. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. There's, the American scene, almost everyone at this point comes from some sort of punk or hardcore background, and a lot of the most unique bands are somehow embracing that. And the key thing for this is that the punky aspect of it is not just the Discharge or Misfits influence that's like inherent to second wave black metal, right? It's like American hardcore with 90s hardcore with like breakdowns and two steps. So basically that's a good example of where it was at, but it's become this thing. It started to gel around basically Hammerheart and Bloodfire Death, specifically like the driving majestic mid-tempo parts. And then he's got all these other influences, which I know you picked up on throughout this, that are sort of pulled in around it. Last year, he did this record called Vampiric Odinism. Awesome title, first of all. Vampires or werewolves, porque no los dos. Right? And sort of focused on Odin's role in necromantic magic, and it sort of had this ritual structure, like it was all focused on one kind of maybe animal sacrifice or something. But it was it had this very specific mood that was kind of sustained for the whole thing. And so it felt like one of his most coherent things so far, but also not quite a full album statement, And after that, the Year of Silence. And now he comes out with this, and I feel like, I don't know if this is absolutely flawless or whatever, but this to me feels like an arrival moment for Elegiac. I think it's about time,
I gotcha. Yeah, I think for me, I feel very positive about this album. I would still say I think I have a reservation. I think it's the next record where he really arrives. Because the way I read this music, and I've heard bits of Elegiac before, just like a song here or there. And hearing this as a full record, I get the sense it's kind of a strange comparison, but as a meta comparison, I want to compare it to a band that we covered last year, which is also a one-man black metal project in the US, which is Sardonic Witchery. And obviously musically they don't have too much in common. Yeah, but Sardonic Witchery, for those who didn't hear that episode, awesome album. You should definitely check it out. Sardonic Witchery is a sort of record collector's black metal album where he's got this tremendously expansive love of different styles of black metal, and he just decided to do, I'm going to do a bunch of different kinds of songs. I'm going to develop them very rigorously based on these established parts, and I'm just going to make the best thing that I can out of these very simple materials. I think there's something similar that goes on here, where I think there's a lot of different kinds of songs being played on this record, and for the most part, they're all very good. But I think that there's a block of songs in the beginning of the record, like the first 4 or so, which have a more distinct feel that say to me that this is what the band wants to be or is aspiring to be. And I think that the next record, when it fully coalesces, it's all going to arrive. Which is interesting because it's in tandem with so many other guys from the US black metal scene kind of arriving at a similar series of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear this as more coherent than you do. That might be because I've been following him for longer.
I can see that, yeah.
But I agree that it's a little uneven. I think I think the strongest tracks are at the beginning and at the end, and those all form a unit. There's kind of some palate cleansing stuff that happens in the middle that, I think is a bit of a lull. But if you cut that out, you'd still have about 40 minutes of sick music. But I suppose instead of quibbling about that, I should just play a sample. So here's the beginning of the record. This is a track with the, complicated, refined, and subtle name, Hammer of Chaos. Death metal guy, do you like a well-placed black metal?
I do, and I actually really like the well-placed, because it's so surprising, huge, soaring, clean vocal thing at the very front of the track. Like, that got me.
Yeah,
I was like,
for sure.
The moment I heard that, the first time I put the record, I was like, okay, you have my attention. All right, here we go.
Well, that's like the thing this album does a thing you like, which is starting with the climax.
Oh yeah.
And in a way that riff comes to, this is an infinite riff kind of thing, which I know you're going to circle back to later, but like the riff comes in like it's been playing for a long time and it's concluding some song.
Oh, well, it's just
it's
well, I think that's just because this is just a folk song.
Oh, for sure. No, yeah. So so that's what we should talk about, right? That's a wonderful melody. And it has a very, without sort of, being like, anthropological or something, you can hear how it's metal riffing that's trying to cleave to certain folk qualities and melodies.
I mean, it's not even like a reach or anything. It's just Scotch-Irish. Like, I think that a variation on that melody is the basis of a lot of old Irish folk songs, and especially with the way that he keeps using it as a refrain, it is like an Irish folk song. You keep returning back to this main melodic motif over and over again. It's basically a two-riff song, but it works because the riffs are perfectly placed.
Yeah, no, yeah. So that is absolutely a place. Yeah, you've linked. So yeah, I mean, we've said this new kind of American metal, which I think, we'll try to come up with a name for, but it has this bluegrass or country quality to it, and I think the bluegrass thing is the most distinct. Bluegrass or hill music is most distinctive in this band. And I think he actually lives in the Alleghenies now.
Yeah, he does.
So, so he's got some connection to that region. I think he was on the West Coast before. But there's a hill music, Scots-Irish quality to the melody for sure. And as somebody who has spent a lot of time trying to write melodies like that, in that kind of barbarian warrior pentatonic minor kind of thing, kind of Celtic sounding, that is such a good one. Because it's not just duh. If you said duh, 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 no, it's not bad, right? But this has got all those grace notes in it, those droning grace notes. Da-dum, da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, dum, 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 bwah, bwah.
Well, yeah,
and they come in...
that's what ties it most closely to actual Irish folk music, is like, the number of, like, even, like, English folk songs where it's, a couple, like a couplet of lyrics and then a sort of droning concluding, like, melodic ostinato line before it loops back in on itself. It's the same thing being done here.
The ants go marching 2 by 2. Hurrah, hurrah. Right?
Yeah, basically. That's completely correct.
I was actually thinking of that melody a while ago. It's like, you know what? We have some goofy popular... We have a goofy children's melody or pop jingle layered over that melody, but that's got to be an ancient marching song. Right? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So anyway, point being, he hits those drones, and he hits them not in places that hew to black metal set forms, but in this kind of organic way that relative to metal is, quote, oddly timed, but makes perfect sense with the folk music thing. And that brings out what I think is the big sort of innovation in, he's been continually developing new technologies. I feel like you could hear on that last sample on Rise from the Ashes, his thing before was riffing based on these big blocky rhythm riffs with these well-chosen chords, right? He had a really good ear for harmony, but even in these kind of strongly melodic parts, like the beginning of Rise from the Ashes, right? He's kind of following set rhythmic forms. And I feel like he's mastered, like, melody proper, freed from riff forms, free from rhythm guitar per se. And that's not just in the lead parts, but there's way more of an emphasis on lead parts here. And also those sort of almost just leading with that death metal-y trem lead, but focused on this very sort of glorious, warlike pentatonic melody, places it very firmly in the vein of some of the other American bands, like Into Oblivion and Mortem.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, this whole idea of revisiting the pentatonic scale and the actual understanding of just how versatile it is, rather than, it makes things bluesy, has been one of the most important developments in American metal, is to realize, oh wow, there's actually other things we can do with this scale other than sound like Sabbath, and I mean, it's the fundamentals. Yeah.
And there are a couple little nods to more bluesy styles here, which I think is nice. It sort of marks it as American, but they're always just nods. It's never an attempt to do something like blues sounding, and it always sounds pretty black metal, but it it sounds kind of bluesy in the way that, like, Celtic Frost might have or something, right?
Here's so for my first sample, this is a record where I would say, like I was talking about up front, there's a lot of different kinds of songs at work. And what I want to pull up now is the third track on the record, called Sanguine Fire. And this is a kind of US black metal song, and I would say more specifically, it's basically an Inquisition song. And I know that you kind of feel that it's just kind of what this guy sounds like now, and maybe with some more listening of some of his other stuff, I might be inclined to agree, but it's pretty hard to listen to this and not be like, oh yeah, that's into the infernal regions of the ancient cult right there, so...
Yeah, well, I think you were absolutely right about the Inquisition comparison. That is, it's. I've always seen Elegiac in terms of the way he's drawing on this sort of, pagan sounding European black metal and kind of this folk music vibe and this Bathory vibe, right? And so I'd been perceiving it more in terms of this sort of folky, hammer-on drone technique. But you're absolutely right that also was used a ton by Old Inquisition.
I think that
Inquisition always used to seem like this weird sui generis thing, but maybe now we can see them as ancestors of this new breed of American black metal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that really it's just a matter of... I mean, I think it's safe to say that Elegiac probably listens to a lot of Inquisition. I think that just about anyone who's in American black metal and takes it seriously listens to a lot of Inquisition. But, I mean, also, I mean, whether it sounds like Inquisition or not, I mean, Inquisition's just reaching back to the same things, which are, like, originating kind of blues and country rock guitar technique. And I think there will come a point where the technique, specifically the sort of physical guitar technique that Inquisition used, will be fully subsumed into US black metal. But I think that's gonna take probably, well, we got our 10-year rule. It'll probably take another 10 years for everyone to just embrace
You think
that.
another 10? I think the 10 years has elapsed because it's starting to show up in this guy's playing, right? Or in the way that all these other bands are doing these kind of, what Inquisition did was that they took these things, Inquisition sounds bluesier than any of these other bands, but what they did was they took those sort of droning, they inserted into sort of barbaric war metal songs, they inserted these droning kind of primordial reptile folk songs. And I feel like that is being picked up on now. I
basically agree. I think that my thing is that Inquisition is kind of an interesting Rorschach test of, like, what people hear most distinctly in it. And for me, I hear, like, AC/DC most distinctly in Inquisition. Other people hear sort of like a cryptic sort of Indo-raga drone melodies. Other people hear the really blasting sort of like post-immortal type riffing, and nobody's wrong, but it's very interesting where your ear takes you when it comes to that band, if you know what I mean.
That's a good point, but I also agree with you about AC/DC. I think what I hear in Inquisition is somebody hearing Hell's Bells and hearing a kind of primordial sinister folk tune under it. It's like hearing Hell's Bells as ancestral hill music or whatever.
I can see that. For anyone listening who hasn't heard us talk about this, AC/DC is a phenomenal band who is incredibly overrated despite being one of the biggest rock bands in the world.
Underrated, yes.
That's what I meant, incredibly underrated, rather. But here's another example of a reinterpretation of an older black metal technique, and I think this one is a little bit more pointed because here I think we're going to connect to a thesis I'm starting to develop about what may be the absolute kernel at the core of modern American black metal. So let's listen to a couple tracks later. This is off Winds of the North. So let's just listen to a snatch of that, and then I'm going to compare it to another older band, and we can kind of talk about the relationship there. it might be a toss-up between that and the opening track for my favorite on the record.
Oh, it's definitely one of the high points. Yeah, I was actually just thinking, in terms of places to start the record, you either, with like casual listening, you either start on the first track and definitely make it through that series of the first three, or you start here.
Yeah.
Which is sort of after the midpoint of the album. But this track is such a banger.
Oh, yeah.
And so that hammer-on guitar technique is like classic Elegiac. And that's the thing, one of the things that makes him really unique. And where you can hear those bluegrassy hammer-ons. You can hear a lot of emo in it, too, which is something the death metal guy has stressed about American black metal. But you think you got a source for this, a source that I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I think I've got the source for this one. So my first point is I think that this song is basically an updated and I guess you could argue kind of an improved version of the Judas Iscariot song from Hateful Visions off Heaven in Flames. And I think that Judas Iscariot is more of a me thing than a you thing, right?
Yeah, I think I basically completely approve. There's a lot of stuff I like where you tell me it sounds like Judas Iscariot. It's just something that, like, now I probably put off checking it out because I'm like, oh, that's the death metal guy's band, whatever. But like, I approve. I just don't know it well.
Well, shit, man. As much as you talk about wanting to hear black metal that conveys the essence of the Stooges or something, here you go, man. It's fucking J.I. So,
all right,
let's listen to the first couple minutes, basically, of From Hateful Visions, and immediately you're gonna hear, oh, this is the same kind of song. So let's do it. Oh man, can you imagine when I was like 15 years old and I heard that for the first time and I was like, wait, black metal can be like this? This isn't what I know about black metal. And then it was there and it made perfect intrinsic sense to me. But yeah, so what's your take on it? Because I'd say that's like Winds of the North, okay, it's from Hateful Visions for 2021, basically.
Well, death metal guy, I hate to say it, but you're right again. This is, yeah, I mean, I can totally see that. And this song is definitely more, he often uses those kinds of riffs as parts in these longer songs. Here, it's really the basis for the whole song. Actually, no, he often uses it as the basis for whole songs. Never mind. But this song, there's a lot of a resemblance to Hateful Visions, for sure. And it sort of keeps the emo vibe in it, but, like, boosts it to a much more sort of aggressive. You know, you can see how back in the day people would hear a track like From Hateful Visions and think it was, early depressive black metal or something, right?
Yeah, well, what's fascinating is, like, just looking at the YouTube comments of the Judas Iscariot track.
Oh,
like,
me too.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like, if the
yes.
If the AC/DC drummer played black metal, or reminds me of post-punk and goth, or the opening riff is from a Bryan Adams song, and it's like, yeah, those are all parts of what make
this
American
one reminds me
black
of goth
metal.
rock. Yeah, as our Gled says, this one reminds me of goth rock, only much more extreme. And somebody else compares it to Life Lover. And that's, if I could, my obscure reference for this guitar style would be Forgotten Woods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Which I didn't realize till I heard the Judas Iscariot. But he would have been. He was just a little bit after Forgotten Woods, but basically at the same time. But like, that is one of the only other people in the 90s who were doing this kind of guitar technique, and there it sounded a little bit folkier, but with both there was the same kind of gothy, jangly kind of droning vibe.
And I think that,
and I feel we're talking over each other a lot, but I feel like basically like both of those bands' time is arriving now in terms of this much more mid-tempo rockish black metal stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, my thesis is kind of twofold. One is that the more I think about it and the more I dig into these, like, nowadays U.S. black metal bands, I'm starting to think that Judas Iscariot is the sort of kernel at the core of it. Because honestly, across Judas Iscariot's albums, you will hear almost all the constituent parts of how we understand this new style of U.S. black metal. And two, it's funny people being like, oh, the AC/DC drummer, oh, this is Bryan Adams, oh, this is Life Lover. I think at this point, the U.S. black metal style is this whole continuum of rock and roll and emo and country music, and all of these distinctly American musical inventions applied to black metal. So at this point, when I hear an American black metal band and it sounds like fucking Texas Is the Reason, or it sounds kind of like old Chuck Berry, or it sounds kind of like Scotch-Irish, like Appalachian folk music, it's all part of the same continuum to me. And I think that people are finally starting to realize that.
Yeah, and those are very disparate musics in terms of the history, but it's like, it's almost like by bringing them together in black metal, people are revealing inner affinities that we might not have noticed before.
Yeah.
Or that wouldn't have seemed as interesting before. Yeah, no, I hear it. It's remarkable how coherent this new sound is, right? As far as finding a name for it, I was talking with the guy from Maquahital, and he said he liked the term solar metal, because from him it's, Aztec sun worship. I've always felt like the solar metal term applies more broadly, because you could include a ton of French and Southern European bands in that.
Yeah.
But you could use it for American. Here's another one. Let me pitch it to you in light of this rockish thing. I was thinking outlaw rock.
I do like that. That is very snappy and very fucking cool sounding,
All right, cool. I was thinking sort of menacing understatement in the way that, say, like, Forlorn Spirit from Oldowan refers to his project Desert Eagle. He says it's street rock influenced. And by street rock, he means thuggish, stomping oi music.
Yeah.
Or the somewhat annoying but extremely influential hardcore magazine, Maximum Rock and Roll, which, had some great stuff in it, too. Maximum Rock and Roll, right? They named them, The Who called themselves Maximum R&B. And that was kind of an understatement, right? And so if The Who are Maximum R&B, then Discharge is Maximum Rock and Roll, right?
Yeah. I like that. But now Outlaw Rock, we're going to make that a fucking thing, dude. We're gonna force.
Yeah, all right.
We're gonna force that. You know, fetch is happening, girls, and it's called outlaw rock now.
Put on your oh yeah, fetch. Oh my god, Mean Girls. Man, that's a callback. Oh shit. Man, that's yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, so put on your cowboy boots, boys. So, I suppose we've got one more sample. At this point, you know what we think about Elegiac. You basically know what we think about these albums. We'll try not to say too much. But the last track, Cracks in the Silence, is, I think, another one of the strongest ones. And it draws on that similar sort of stompy, walking tempo, kind of arpeggio drone riff stuff. But then it breaks into something a little bit different that is equally American sounding, and that relates to what we've been talking to. So let's go to sort of the transition in Cracks in the Silence. So you could say that sounds like Druid, but you could also say it sounds like the Smashing Pumpkins, right?
Yeah, and the Smashing Pumpkins are also extremely underrated. What it also
agreed.
sounds like...
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Absolutely. Siamese Dream, dude. Fucking holy shit.
His metal guitar work, there is so much stuff on there that's not just like grungy sort of pseudo-metal stuff. Mm-hmm. His actual metal guitar work is extremely high quality and pretty original.
Oh, definitely. It's also, but he's also pulling from Nirvana on that passage with that. That's from Something in the Way, the last track off Nevermind. I think it was also used on a Deftones song on White Pony, maybe something like that. I mean, it's a pretty typical thing. I'm just showing my encyclopedic knowledge at this point, but again,
nice.
Like,
also Whoa Whoa is also used on Bathory albums, but I see what you mean. There's a kind of convergence between those things.
Well, no, because for the Something in the Way, it's the exact notation. I know that because I've listened to Nevermind.
Oh, I see.
About 1,000 times. But even then, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, American grunge. The sort of like post-nu metal stuff that Deftones did, yeah, that all fits perfectly neatly within this sort of a genre or a style of a genre, American black metal, that is more about the music of a certain youth culture, I would say. It is... Maybe this is a kind of music that can only exist for a little while, because it's about a sort of shared cultural experience that spans many different kinds of music, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure, but I'll think about it. It's certainly I get what you mean in that, like, it's referring to a bunch of things that guys in our generation might be the only people to connect. Girls in our generation too, but you know, I get that, but I feel like maybe that generational specificity is part of just what makes it a sound. I mean, like, it's you know, the echoes of youth culture subculture thing seems right. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting in that these are echoes of mass cultural youth subculture coming back in underground music.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes it so interesting.
Which is
this sort of perverse reflection of the songs that we grew up on, that were still kind of our parents' music, rather, but somehow sunk their artistic claws so deeply in our brain, we find ourselves coming back to them in these very warped ways so many years later.
Yeah, my parents liked the Beatles, but I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get what you mean. Yeah, it's cool.
It's a good record, folks.
Yeah, we like this record, and I think now that you all have heard Elegiac, you understand more what we mean when we're defining this new sort of American or Vinlandic sound, right? Or outlaw rock.
Outlaw rock. That's the only way we refer to it from now on, is outlaw rock.
All right.
So yeah, we like this stock and we like this album. So let's take a quick break and get back with some more.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
Alright, we are back. And this time we got Silvanthrone with Forbidden Pathways to Ancient Wisdom. And
whoa, that's Forgotten Pathways to you.
I've got Forbidden in front of me.
Oh, is it Forbidden? Did I just type the wrong thing? Oh shit, cell phone. Well, that's a great start.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so I think you did like a cool guy name check of these guys the other day. You were talking about seeing them live and stuff, and how they're like cool friends of yours and shit.
They're not friends of mine. I just talked with them. They're good dudes. I did a Terminus news segment is what I did about how this was coming up, and that I endorsed them. Yes, I have met them. They are cool dudes. And I am currently, since we're doing the episode, I'm wearing my dank Silvanthrone long sleeve. They're quite a high energy live act, and that actually comes through in the recordings, which I think is pretty rare in modern black metal. Both playing live, being good at playing live, and recording in a way that captures that. Especially because these aren't like totally raw basement recordings. It's not like a rehearsal room recording thing, but they have a sort of rough and ready kind of sound. Yeah. And in the performance as well. And so you could see this fitting into the same general paradigm of Elegiac. This is much more conventionally metal, but I think we could still fit it in under the outlaw rock heading. And the things that made them kind of American would be that they're drawing a lot from French chivalric black metal and things like that. But they're adding this kind of like, especially on the first EP, they had these kind of rough-hewn, blocky versions of those French riffs and this kind of American swagger. So let's do a sample from that first EP, because I think that's an important reference point for considering this new record. This is the second track from the self-titled EP, and it is, let's start it from the beginning. so that is a cool song. Did you get that huge chorus?
Oh yeah. No, it's what's interesting to me is how much you like this when I think this firmly fits within the Finno-French tradition that you've really tired of over the past year.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think it fits in it less firmly than you might think. That is, it's definitely coming from that, but they're doing something creative to it. So one thing would be that chorus, which just drops in once in the song, goes away, and I've remembered it since I heard it. And you like to talk a lot about metalcore influences and stuff, or parallels to metalcore. There's a part that actually sounds like a metalcore part.
Yeah, that's a black metalcore part.
Yes,
100%.
and it works, because it's like, why can't you do that in a black metal song? It's not like you're doing some rote chug riff or, clean vocals about your girlfriend, right? Or your ex-girlfriend, I suppose. But I think what makes it sound kind of American, it's they're not entirely following the set rhythmic forms that you inherit from the Finnish and French bands.
Yeah.
There's more of an emphasis on bright major key stuff, which you can get from some of the French, but more here. Lots of key change things. They have that kind of weird suspended melody at the beginning. Da, 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 da. It's even hard to kind of hum to remember it. And then it drops down. That's a technique we'll hear the music get on this new record. I think the riffs are shaped a little bit differently, and I think part of it comes because they're not so much drawing, on their first record at least, on the main line of this Finno-French thing. It's not like Satanic Warmaster, Sargeist, whatever French bands you want. I think the first record, the guitarist mentioned he liked Pentagram era Gorgoroth and Peste Noire. Right?
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, you've got the weirdest version of the French bands that has this sort of, brawler energy to it, right? This hooligan vibe. And on the other end, you've got the root of all the French bands, right? So unlike a lot of younger...
We've discussed that before, yeah.
Yeah, he's grasping the influence at the root, right? In Pentagram. And so that's going to give him more of a command of it than guitarists who are taking it secondhand from the Finns or the French. And so you can hear that even in the big chorus. You could imagine us kind of Gorgoroth. You get a lot of dramatic moments on this first record. So that's what I hear as different. It's undoubtedly very much in this sort of modern melodic black metal vein. But I think it's a good version on it. Good version of it. I think this new record, they've moved much closer to what you're describing. And I think it's a little bit of a step back for them. But I think I get why they did it. So do you want to, maybe to capture that, do you want to start with your sample?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we usually go in chronological order, but I think it's fair to start with this kind of perception of it. So, I cannot be objective about this music, because this sounds like everything I was writing when I was about 19 or 20 years old, and I love it completely. It is a combination of, just... like, the bulk is Sargeist, and then there's some Blazebirth Hall, there's some, kind of raw tape black stuff, and there's some French stuff, which is just how I write black metal. It's totally youthful and vigorous, and it's the most fun thing in the world. So let's listen to a song called Layer of Magic for a little bit, which is really cool and makes me think that Satan is a super cool dude. And I'm just unbelievably stoked is the way I would describe my first hearing this. So let's listen to Layer of Magic. I like all those riffs. I like all of those melodic ideas. And I will be completely frank, and the best way to describe it is with two YouTube commentators for this record. One of which says, "This is so weird. It feel like I already know the first two songs. Am I alone in that case?" To which another commenter responds, "Probably you almost hear this riffs before." And I agree, sir. I probably have almost hear this riffs before. This is within a very strict sort of paradigm. Honestly, the opening riff is basically a reinterpretation of Sargeist's Empire of Suffering from Let the Devil In, the world's greatest album of all time. And I've got no problem with that. The devil is insanely cool and strong, and I love this. This is just wonderful. This is candy for me. Num num num. I have no intelligent things to say about it. It's just cut and dried, made for me. You know what I mean?
It's interesting you said Empire of Suffering. I was thinking much more. I think the reason you have heard this riffs before is that now that you finally heard Corellian Satanist Madness, you have heard My Kingdom of Darkness. And this song is built around the main melody to My Kingdom of Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
My Kingdom of Darkness and Evil. You know.
Oh, well, Sargeist and Satanic Warmaster are constantly stealing from each other, so it's fair.
Yeah, it's all the same scene, but yeah. So for me, I find that moving more towards that sort of thing is a step backward, because there are, it's very well executed. And, they did a good version of that riff, and then they developed it in a good way. So right where you ended the sample, I thought was interesting, because another band would have just gone straight back to the main riff, but what you got there was this sort of attenuated, sort of muted version of it. It was kind of like they'd darkened it a little bit, made it a little bit rougher. They kind of Silvantroned it, whereas before they were just Sargeisting.
Oh, no, it's like they're doing a lot of kind of subtle variations on the same melody. They're doing a lot of... One thing that's cool, you don't really hear it in the sample, but something that occurs a little later, is they're attempting some kind of dramatic key changes here and there, which is very ambitious. They're not executed perfectly. Like, this band... Like, I think you said these are younger dudes, right?
Yeah, they're probably in their early 20s. Could be younger.
So, like, you get some of that just because, like, some of the transitions between ideas can be a little ragged on this music, which is not necessarily a problem, but it does indicate that kind of, like, youthful go, go, go energy, which is part of the charm of this record to me. But I think this is a record that, while it's definitely in this, like, Finno-French tradition, you can see them reaching outside of it. And I think in general, I'm just really not as critical of this kind of thing, just because it's like, I mean, what am I going to do? Knock something that's, like, really well executed within a certain tradition? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I like well executed things within a tradition. I just think that, like, it's becoming harder and harder to execute it well in a way that I find remarkable or interesting, because there are a lot of other people executing it well. And, if we want to take just those Sargeist and Satanic Warmaster style riffs and compare them, they would not stack up against Finn. They would not stack up against Totenvach, the best of Totenvach. They would not stack up against several other bands.
Well, that being said,
however,
wait. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think what's happened here is that they've probably, like, a lot of the things that made the first record so great to me were its idiosyncrasies, the way it was moving around the edges of this tradition. And I feel like what they've done is, like, we want to master the center of it now, right? Maybe even a little bit of, like, that sounds like metalcore, let's not do that, right? Or, let's just do... I think this band sounds better when they're just sitting on these big ringing chords, kind of. Or they draw melodies out more. this clearly, they're trying to do these more rapid melodies, but it leads them towards these stock riff forms they're inheriting from these other bands, like eighth note here, eighth note here, eighth note here, eighth note here.
Okay, I get that.
However, I think in some places they pull it off very well, and so I think I think this is a move they had to make, and they will profit from it in the long run, I think is my optimistic read on this.
Yeah.
So here's a track, Embrace of the Morning Star, which will start with a riff that you and I will that is completely in the Finno-French tradition, and you and I will completely agree it's fucking sick. Okay? So, all right, Embrace of the Morning Star.
Haha, chivalric black metal riff go do 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 do. Fuck yeah.
Extremely chivalric, right? Yeah. Yeah, to my mind, the best of those chivalric bands is Aorlhac. They're kind of the ones who invented it, although they'll never get any credit. But that really reminds me of Aorlhac, and is a riff worthy of the major French bands. And the cool thing about that, the fast one, is that has a distinctive, you could hear it echoing phrase ideas from these French bands, but it's got a pretty distinct shape to it. And it's got this kind of, I think it genuinely achieves that feel they want of building in kind of more rapid movement to the riffs. That's got this kind of, it sort of rises, falls, turns on a dime. It's very agile, but then it releases into this big block riff that I think is very Silvanthrone, and you can hear this kind of, you can hear open strings just ringing, buzzing in a way that I like a lot. Is that a key change, Bud? You have a better ear for those things than I do.
I don't think it's a full key change. I think they're like augmenting the key they're in with a couple like chromatic notes. So it's not like a full key change, but it kind of gives you like a shortcut effect of one, you know what I mean?
And the interesting thing is it also goes from a bright minor scale, like a kind of noble Dorian, it drops to a kind of like darkened major idea. Like,
yeah,
when
it's very interesting.
Yeah. So there's sophisticated stuff at work here, and I think that pairing of like this faster stuff they've taken on board with that kind of just sort of smash the chords out thing that they're already quite good at, with that subtle compositional thing linking them, I think that's great. So what do you want to sample? Oh, maybe should we sample yours at the end? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
Okay, yeah. So here's another place where I think you get more of this an effective integration of this more down the line melodic Euroblack stuff. This is from an interest. I like this track title. This is from Ghosts of the Desolate Corridor.
Very Dungeons and Dragons. I dig it.
That is true. That is true. Yes. I'm gonna roll D20 to detect traps.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Oh man, those sort of bridging reverse chord shape riffs at the end there.
Those were so cool, right?
I swear to fucking God, I wrote a couple of those when I was like 19. My hand
where are
God, they're for something I might record at one point. It was a project I told you about a while back where I referred to them as black metal gestures, within this very sort of like restricted sort of writing format, sort of my retarded interpretation of what if Iljarn but melodic. But that's just one of the things that I love about this is like, oh my God, it's like I feel like these guys, I mean, if these guys are probably in their early 20s now, they're in like the same place that I was 10 years ago at the same age. You know what I mean? It's like there's just this like immediate psychic connection there. It's like everything you like, I like too, and at the same time in my life,
Well, yeah, so what's smart about that they did there is there seems to be a consistent thing where their darkest parts and their most major key parts are related to each other, and they kind of modulate between them using this kind of, it's like Baroque key change modulation stuff. It's like stuff that Infernus from Gorgoroth does, but not many other people in black metal.
Well, I think it's they've got an interesting thing going on where it's like you said, you'll have these very kind of bright and chivalric minor key parts and these sort of like the darkest parts of the major key riffs, which is interesting because what it means is they're operating within sort of a more restricted melodic space, but the parts of each style they're using are closer together.
Yeah,
that's
right. That's right. That's
so they can kind of move and dance in and out of these different sorts of keys and these different sorts of melodic ideas, but it all feels interrelated due to their kind of proximity on the scale.
It's not schizoid. And they're able to pull in those kind of more grim-sounding Norwegian ideas without them seeming out of place at all. But that first riff also, I mean, that was a chivalric riff that let it off, and boy, that's the riff where I feel like not only is that a masterful riff of the French tradition, but they've given it their own spin, because that like da 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 da, it gets really pentatonic at the end in a very American way, almost in a kind of like Appalachian Spring kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, that's a genius riff. That opening riff is
yes, I agree. That riff just kills me.
That's like
you heard me just screaming while we were listening.
Oh yeah. It's like well, that reminds me of something you turned me on to, which was like I should have been listening to these guys the whole time, given what I'm into, which is Vehemence, who are just like the coolest band in the world that no one gives a shit about.
No, people like Vehemence.
I don't see anyone talk about them, but that reminds me of like some of the coolest parts of Vehemence, and of course, my old favorite Heathen would have some stuff like that. But
no, that is true. I bet these guys do like Heathen.
I mean, well, if they're making this kind of music and they're listening to Gorgoroth, then that means they're listening to Heathen. There's like an SAT word problem involved there.
Well, I hadn't really heard Heathen until you showed me, like, probably 6 months ago. But yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, and then you realize like this is the connective tissue between all these ideas.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So real quick, last sample. So the vast majority of this stuff is in this very sort of tight Franco-Finnish tradition, but the final track on this record shows the band trying to make another kind of song. It's not a great song. It's got very cool ideas, but they're not really fully developed. But what it indicates to me is that these are guys who are young and full of energy, but still kind of have the foresight to realize we need to expand. We need to think of new ideas. We need to figure out how to develop new kinds of songs. And that makes it kind of compelling for me. So, this is off the just fucking wonderfully titled PABM Eternal, which I assume refers to Pennsylvania Black Metal Eternal. There's nothing better.
It says PABM on the back of my shirt with a massive upside-down cross.
There's nothing better than black metal, like, repping its fucking area code.
Yeah, for sure.
Bring in those hardcore-isms, please. So let's listen to kind of the ending couple minutes of this track. And this is, to my mind, these guys attempting to write a sort of Bill Skirnier song. So let's give that a shot. So you can tell that this is very different in tone from the rest of the tracks on this record. And it's definitely not the idealized version of it. But like I was saying up front, I think the fact that they're trying to make a song like this points to them having a real, like, kind of concentrated idea of the kind of music they want to play, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely trying to take this kind of epic or glorious or noble sound that's become kind of conventionalized now, and that kind of congealed out of other things, like in Finnish black metal or whatever, and really focus on that as its own vocabulary. And they want to have this. I do think they have a very clear idea of the kind of band they want to be. They want to be this kind of, like, they want it to have this kind of swaggering, manly quality to it, right? And this brightness. And so I can see how, like, a kind of more melancholy but still stompy riff fits in well there. But you said some interesting stuff about it in the notes.
Oh, just like, so I said, for instance, this is guys learning how to do a Bill Skirnier kind of song. So, like, the flaws are kind of obvious to me. The main riff, that dun 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 dun, that's only half of a riff. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you got this kind of A-B variation, but the real version of it, to my mind, would be dun 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 dun. You know, you need some sort of, like, longer, more chivalric piece on the end of it. This is me bullshitting, humming something out. but there's a way to extend that and make it a more substantial thing. And then, like, that bridge riff they have there, that more droney one, you know, kick back the tempo a little bit, play it slower, and, like, arpeggiate it, and that's how you would have a Bill Skirnier song out of the kind of ingredients they have now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they're... Yeah, I mean, maybe they're not trying to write a Bill Skirnier song per se, but I get what you mean that there's a... I get what you mean that, like, that chorded riff that they rocket out on does seem a little bit like a... It does seem like the first part of a riff. It seems like it's the elementary gesture of a riff, and the riff isn't... Yeah, you know, like the block is... The statue isn't out of the marble yet on that one.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and I would say that it's them trying to make a Bill Skirnier song, because it does strike me as like, these guys heard Reconquering Atlantean Supremacy and were like, fuck, how do we do something kind of like this? And then very quickly, this is what came out of that process, you know? Because they were all so stoked about hearing this kind of thing. And that's one of the things that makes this a cool record, though, is that sort of, like, immediacy, that fucking... I've got a fucking riff here. All right, I'm going to do this after that. Yeah, that's sick. Let's go. Hey, do blast beats. Do whatever the fuck you want on drums. Just go, you know? And that's wonderful. I love hearing that in this kind of music.
It definitely has a just go kind of energy to it. So here's a question. Speaking of that, what do you think about the length of this record? Because this is being positioned as a full length, right?
Oh, I don't read it as a full length. This is an EP.
I agree. This is, if we were to judge this as a full... That's a thing, like, if we were to judge this as a full length, we would have to be harder on it, simply because it's still all kind of rough, right? Mm-hmm. As an EP, I probably liked the first one better, but it's almost pointless of me to compare them then, because they're just stages in the development of a sound, right? And so I think...
It's worthy of remembering these guys have literally been a band since, like, what, 2018? Like, this band barely exists so far. You know, I don't think so. I think they've all been playing with each other for a while. Does it say 2018 on the Metal Archives? Yeah, it says on Metal Archives. I mean, the first demo came out in 2018. So it's like, I mean, for me, it's like, honestly, at this point, I don't think a metal band even really gets its legs under it until, like, 5 years in, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get what you mean. So it's, I imagine these guys have the background playing with each other before that, would be my guess.
Probably.
But yeah, it's a new project. Judged as an EP, this is it's a great step towards the full length, you know, and you could definitely hear them branching. You can hear the core of the thing that I identify with their musical personality, and then you can hear them bringing in these distinct other strains. Sometimes it, you know, some places I think it works better than others, but, like, you can hear that some places it really works, and you can hear that incorporation happening.
Yeah. I can feel that. So overall, I think, I'm a fan of this band, definitely now. Really excited to see what they do next with it. Just, fuck it, man. Just crack something out, again, before the end of 2021. I think I feel like they're chomping at the bit, you know? I feel like...
That's what I was thinking about the full length, yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, you can mark it as a full length, 25 minutes long. That's pretty short for a black metal record, 5 tracks. I mean, give me the 40-minute version of this, like, really considered, but still with that same energy, and then that could be positioned to be like a huge record of the year for me.
I agree. They probably could release a full length in a year. They've got some time. It's, you know, the other thing is, like, it's got to have something to do with COVID, right? You know, it's just like. You know, probably I imagine that can't have made for a lot of bands. If you were writing and rehearsing this year, COVID would have really gotten your way. So if your plan was, like, we were trying to, like, you know, in all sorts of different ways. And so if it's like we were going to try to crank out a full length by this time, suddenly the amount of time you have to play and record and whatever has contracted, and everyone is inconvenienced and scattered and whatever, you know.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so then you're just like, fuck it, let's put out the full length anyway, right? Because we've been delayed long enough.
So overall, I like it a lot, and I'm looking forward to what they do next. So, real quick, for an interlude, you got an idea?
Interlude.
Because I was thinking, because I haven't actually heard Aorlhac before.
I don't even know what Aorlhac is. I've heard the name.
Aorlhac?
Oh, Aorlhac. Oh, I thought you were saying Aorlhac as in, like, Graf Aorlhac, like the vampire.
No, I don't fucking know how you pronounce it.
It could be the... I mean, it's probably the name of a... It's probably the name of a... That probably is a band, O-R-L-O-K. But Aorlhac. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could... Absolutely. So let's do one from... well, let's see. What do I want to do? I think their last album is their best, and it was called L'Esprit des Vents. They write a lot about their region in southern France, which is I think part of it's in what would now be Provence. There is a language there, a dialect called Languedoc, that was sort of it's the Occitan region, yeah. And that language and people who spoke it were almost exterminated in the Middle Ages by, I think, one of the first European crusades. The rumor is that the people think that they were reputed to be practicing, like, they were called the Albigensians. They were reputed to be practicing the Arian heresy, that's A-R-I-A-N, or something like that. But people think it might be because they were crypto-pagans.
Okay.
And that's where the troubadours came from, the medieval sort of warrior bards. So Aorlhac writes a lot about that. L'Esprit des Vents is brilliant, but where they really kind of... I think if anyone starts with this, they gotta hear... To start Aorlhac, they gotta hear the title track from their album La Cité des Vents, which is... This was years ago. I think that came out in 2010 and completely predicts like the way black metal has gone in the next 10 years. So let's go to Sant Flor, La Cité des Vents.
All right, sounds good. So let's listen to that, take a quick break, and get back with the back half of our episode. All right, we are back after some Aorlhac, not Aorlhac, although that is probably, like you said, another black metal band, with something pretty different. One of the easily the weirdest record we've covered this year, with Astral Tomb's Degradation of Human Consciousness. And I remember when we were setting up our schedule on our little Excel document, I under the genre column, I put death metal with a question mark, because how do you even begin to describe something like this? Well, I'm definitely interested in your perspective, because like I did with Meslamtea last year, you first accidentally listened to the wrong record by this band. You listened to their first demo. So how does that extend into this?
Yes, I did a bad. I listened to Subterranean Forms, which I guess was a demo. And I texted you saying, I don't know if it's as weird as you say, but it's definitely weird. Subterranean Forms was kind of... there's a lot of ragged grinding stuff with deliberately nonsense atonal power chord riffs. And, like, more nonsense than is conventional in death metal. Mm-hmm. To a degree where it seems like it reminded me of Lightning Bolt. The energy, just the manic, crazed sort of dark side weed energy. And
dark side weed energy is a great way to describe this band.
Dude, we should start selling a Terminus supplement called that.
It's like, for the people who want to smoke a lot of weed, but then listen to fucking Winter instead of, cool stoner doom.
It's a supplement, but it's actually just like, liquid THC, whiskey, and speed.
But yeah. So I mean,
we call it the Neo John Belushi.
Yeah. So this band definitely reminds me how fun it was to get high and listen to Lightning Bolt back when I smoked weed. and but like it's very metal. It also, the fast parts maybe remind me most of just like Beharit. Like if you heard Oath of Black Blood and thought we want to play our riffs like that. They sounded pretty sort of frantic, kind of sloppy blast, and then a lot of weird sort of choppy chug stuff interacting with that. I thought that some of the nonsense riffing was cool. Some of it I found a little bit less cool, but I sort of understood the point of it, right? And there was hilarious sampling. There were some fairly sincere, sort of gory horror samples. And there was also an amazing sample at the beginning of Mammoth Realm of what I can only describe as like either, Buck Rogers or Conan the Barbarian beating the shit out of an alien.
I'll have to check that out and see if I recognize it, because I'm wondering if it's maybe from like an episode of the original Star Trek or something like that.
Yeah, somebody's just going like, "Ah!" And then you hear like some horrible monster sound, and then like, "Ah!" So it definitely has a Conan the Barbarian punching an alien quality to it. I strongly approved of it, but then I listened to this from today, and man, I like this even better.
This is so fucking weird, dude. And I don't say that lightly, because I listen to some tremendously weird music.
Yeah.
But this is fucking out there, man.
Well, what I heard last night, even before I listened to the right record, it did remind me of one of your favorite bands, which is Black Mass of Absu.
Yes, that is something we both arrived at. And so for people who aren't familiar, which is probably most people listening, Black Mass of Absu is like super deep cut shit from, I think, Rochester, New York, something like that. They only did some like demos and splits and EPs. I think most of the guys were from kind of the industrial scene. And to describe Black Mass of Absu is extremely challenging. But imagine a sort of blackened sludge doom, but played kind of like it's guys trying to play rock and roll, but they're fucking insane people.
Blackened sludge doom before that term was a twinkle in the eye of Cult Nation.
Exactly, blackened sludge doom, but before that referred to like nice bands to listen to your girlfriend. It's some of the, I would honestly say, some of the like sickest, most depraved music I've heard.
Bro, these guys were doing the balaclava aesthetic long before it was cool, and think less Ukrainian paramilitary and more like Slipknot.
And more like, I'm actually going to commit a home invasion on you now. That's going to happen. And then I'm going to, like, do a weird satanic ritual in your living room while you're still asleep after I broke in.
Yes.
So, Astral Tomb, I mean, there really all you can talk about are these disparate reference points, like Black Mass of Absu, Ride for Revenge is one we picked up on, which also reaches back towards the Beharit thing we were talking about. Mm-hmm. But also, like, Winter. One of the closest things would be Infester. I don't know. Have you ever heard the Infester album?
I didn't hear the Winter so much on the thing I heard last night, in part because it was faster. I did hear the Winter on this after you played it. Definitely with a less thick version of the tone, but certainly the riffing and rhythm ideas. Infester, no. Never heard. Sounds grindy.
Infester, To the Depths and Degradation. A total, like, Anus or deathmetal.org classic record. They did like one record. This would have been back in probably 92. It was released on Moribund. They broke up. I have no idea where those guys are now. But it is one of the last gasp of death metal being the sickest and most evil thing on the planet before black metal achieved hegemony over that idea. It's just like, it's just awful. It just makes you feel horrible.
Infestor? Alright, I'm gonna look this up.
Infestor to the depths and degradation. Fucking outstanding record, dude.
Oh, cool logo, man.
Dude.
And this was in Seattle during the height of grunge.
Oh yeah, total like reaction against that shit too.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But I guess we should probably play a sample, shouldn't we? So people get an idea. Because I think you've got the one off the first track. This is just a little 3-track EP. So we should probably go with yours first.
So we could do yours first because I feel like yours flags the things that struck us most about it, but mine is the most sort of okay, we'll start with mine. This is from the first track, Devouring Sorrow, and what I wrote in the notes is, it's so easy to get excited about the strange out playing on this record, out in the kind of jazz way, as in you're playing beyond the frame of the song, that it's tempting to skip over the sections of extraordinarily strong, bang your head through a wall chug metal. So, let's start there with the stuff that actually sounds like winter.
Let's do it.
Like caveman death metal is like the big, bulky, like martial artist throwing his weight around in the town square, and he picks a fight with the little sort of drunk homeless man in the corner. And Astral Tomb is the drunk homeless man who teleports behind him and kicks him in the head.
I can see that. It's like because there's such an understated yet unbelievable technicality to this music.
Yes, it's extremely skillful, and also, my God, is it ignorant. Like,
yeah, no, it's because if you subtract the weird, like, noisy, textured lead stuff from the left channel, and you're just left with the chug riffs, then you just have, like, an abstract slam band, basically.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like that part. I don't think, if anyone who knows our taste knows we like that part. But I like, you know, I like that you could hear in the slide riffs. That's a very Winter Into Darkness thing. Also a Skin Chamber thing. But there was that awesome screaming noise solo, right? And,
yeah.
And that reminds me a lot of the track I played at the end of the last show, which was Amoebix's The Power Remains, which has this, basically a guitar solo. Actually, some of the only stuff I've heard that really sounds like it is this. But just an absolutely deranged, aggressive guitar solo. This Amoebics had this thing where it was like they pretty much literally taught themselves music. Like, they had to figure out that if you put your fingers on the strings up there, it made the sound go higher. Like, I'm sure someone somewhere tried to learn part of a song, but that's basically what they did.
No, that's kind of like how Bolt Thrower did it, really.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating. I've been reading some old interviews with Bolt Thrower where it's like, Bolt Thrower, when they did In Battle There Is No Law, they had all been playing their instruments for like 6 months.
No way. Holy shit.
Yeah. And it's amazing because it's like, that's why they don't sound like anything in death metal, because they literally just learned instruments for this band, and they can only play Bolt Thrower songs.
Well, they could only play Amoebic songs with blast beats. It's
basically.
They were, they probably met one of those stench bands, and the old guys who gave them the drugs were like, "Why don't you play guitar?" But yeah, so like this is basically like, this has a similar sort of anti-music quality, but it's by really good musicians.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. Well, actually, coming off that, let me play my sample.
Nice.
Transcendental Visions, the second track. So, people are going to listen to this and they're going to think that it's sloppy. It's not. The timing in this music is rigorous. And sometimes you think that it's sort of like jazz-like, that it's kind of floating in free time, that it's just based off pure muscle memory. But there's these tiny things, these tiny reflections in the different guitar channels and stuff that prove that, oh no, this is done very exactly.
You think they're counting?
I think they're counting. I think
Damn.
they're counting very precisely.
Damn.
Or they just get really stoned and they've played these songs a lot.
Those are not mutually exclusive.
True, that is true. Well, something I would compare it to would be the a record we covered last year by Insalubrity, where it's so loose and free-flowing that you think, some of these things that happen on guitar are mistakes, but then the mistakes will be echoed in the second channel of the guitar, like a couple measures later, and you're like, oh my god, this is all going as planned. So let's listen to
Yes.
So let's listen to a little bit of Transcendental Visions, and then, holy shit, this is the track that made me decide, I want to cover this on the show. So
nice.
Let's do it. So you can tell, despite how abstract and kind of free-flowing that is, that the timing is literally perfect throughout all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's, it's amazing because this music has this. A big thing we talked about is like it seems almost improvised, but you can tell it's too precise to be improvised, which means they have spent an unbelievable amount of effort making it sound like it's improvisational and abstract, you know?
Yeah, or composing by jam and then actually taking the most out parts of the jamming and saying, okay, how can we remember this?
How do we make a song out of these parts? Important question, like, you know, and this is a question we'll get to on the final record of the show. Is this even death metal anymore?
Yeah, I mean, we've been asking this question about a lot of things lately, and I think it's a fair question. Like with Mephitis, right?
Mephitis is more metal than this is.
In some sense, yes. Mephitis is closer to the idea of, like, you know, masterful coherence and musicianship.
In some sense, I'm fine with saying yes because it's so distinct from black metal. And the kind of malice against music that these guys seem to show is, I feel like a distinctively more of a death metal or grind affect. Or, yeah, certainly grind. I suppose, how's this? If we hear more stuff that sounds like it, we can come up with a new word for it, right?
Yeah, I get that.
For now, what this sounds like to me is extremely creative and original death metal that kind of, you know, we've found a few different ways that people have been doing. We came into this last year really pessimistic about modern death metal. And I feel like both of us, we've each found some fairly promising bands doing new things in different ways. I guess this is another one.
Yeah, no, I guess the point of curiosity is, like, there is a certain lane for black metal that is no longer heavy metal. But
no, yes, yeah.
I don't know if the same thing really exists in the same way for death metal. I think there's arguments about, you know, the extreme fringes of brutal death that we've talked about, like a lot of the new standard elite bands, which are basically brutal death metal minus any heavy metal, minus any connection to the origin. But this is a little bit different. This is like death metal chromatic melodic ideas and some technique totally divorced from any idea of the riff, or honestly any idea of a song in a way that we conventionally understand.
It's certainly divorced from riffing, and riffing is more important to death metal than... Yes, it might be that one reason black metal got the momentum is that heavy metal is built into death metal's DNA. In a way it's not for black metal. And the riff and a certain idea... staggering proficiency and coherence and maximum volume and intense heaviness and whatever. And, you know, Mephitis in some ways, even though their music is so refined, is still kind of in line with that. You know, play so well you make other people quit.
Yeah.
These are people who can play really well but aren't using it in that way. I take your point that it might not be. You know, what I was thinking is... Maybe the riff is... Well, comes relevant to your next band, too, but it's like, maybe, at least in some wings of metal, what needs to happen is people getting rid of the riff.
Yeah, or at least the idea of the riff as we understand it now.
Exactly. It doesn't mean getting rid of cool melodic ideas. In fact, I think it can mean two things. It can mean moving sub-riff into noise and texture, which this band is certainly doing. And it can mean moving beyond riff into writing actual melodies, which bands like Into Oblivion are doing.
Yeah,
Or in their other way, these kinds of American outlaw rock bands who are, in some sense, it's more musically conservative than black metal was, where they have chord changes and they have songs with folk melodies in them, right?
Yeah. So let's get to the final track, which we both sampled off. Orbiting Fractals, which might be might be the best track on
I agree.
this
I
EP.
agree.
Yeah. So a lot of people are... What's very interesting about this band is these guys are clearly coming from this, like, totally bizarre musical location. But just because of the thematics and the name and stuff, people are lumping them into, I guess, what people are now calling Astral death metal.
Oh, God, no.
Which is fucking a horrible phrase, because there's been cool death metal bands doing songs about space and shit for many years. What it really means is, oh, we're going to group this with blood incantation.
Yeah, exactly. This is... is there any... Do they have anything... Is this band from the same area as Blood Incantation? Where are they from?
I think so, because Astral Tomb are from Denver.
Denver.
And I think Blood Incantation might be also. Yes, Blood Incantation are also from Denver. But
Well, good news, boys. Your band wipes the fucking floor with Blood Incantation.
abso-fucking-lutely. But it feels obvious that there's absolutely nothing musically in common between these two bands.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are, like, associating them with this, but honestly, what's going on here has a lot more in common with, like, the most abstract corners of 90s prog death, the most abstract corners of 90s doom death, and just, honestly, just the weirdest edges of everything you know. So, let's just listen to the opening couple minutes of Orbiting Fractals.
The weirdest edges of everything you know. There you go. They should quote that for their site. Right?
Yeah, that would be great. That's pretty legit, I think. All right, let's check out Orbiting Fractals. Yeah, what do you even say about what's fucking going on there?
I got some things to say.
No, me too, but you go ahead.
Oh, no, you picked the sample. You go, I forgot we got to the end of the sample. I was just enjoying it so much. Jeez. Okay.
So, the way the left channel guitar slips in with this sort of feedback and delay and maybe even a looper pedal, constructing this, brief, not even melodic, purely textural phrase that cuts across the bar of the music and ends up syncing back up with the main rhythm several measures later, sort of almost like a Meshuggah style technique, is just so far in front of basically anyone in death metal.
Was by slips in, do you mean the thing that burst out of my right eardrum, destroying the other riff?
Yes. Basically, yeah.
Yes.
It's like that is true. It doesn't just like tuck back into the pocket. It gets extinguished by some other giant chug riff. Also, something I'm sure you'll mention, the dedication to the chug on this record. And it's like, are there any tremolo riffs?
Are there any power chords that aren't chugged? No and no.
It's literally
no, there might be tremolo lead in the noise soloing, but the way they're tremming is, it's not like a tremolo death or black metal riff. Both for this band and for the next band, I keep thinking about Skullflower. Like, I thought about it a lot in connection to Devilgroth, and I think in relation to this, too. This kind of, outside, abrasive, sort of melodically contoured noise guitar. And I keep thinking about a lot of my favorite bands, which, I mean, obviously we always think about our favorite bands in relation to things, but, like, I think about old bands that aren't in the same genre and shit, you know? God, I can't even remember specifically what I was thinking of when I was listening to this, to that sample. But, yeah, it's very sophisticated.
Yeah, it's a level of abstraction in death metal that we probably haven't seen since, like, Obscura by Gorguts. Like, outside of the realms of, like, ultra brutal death metal where it just becomes, like, totally non-musical figures, you know? Is this genius? Is this actually brilliant music?
This is genius. Yes. This is up there with Concrete Winds, but Concrete Winds is closer. Concrete Winds is like closer to what we would think of as black metal or death metal songs. Whereas
I think part of that is the drumming in Concrete Winds. It's like, okay, they're doing like thrash beats and blast and double bass. Here
Concrete Winds have riffs. They're just riffs written parallel to what actual riffing sounds like.
Yeah. But here it's like, that's actually another thing that's notable is the drum performance on this, which is like in your very first sample off Devouring Sorrow. There's an amazing part where in the midst of one of these heavy chug riffs, he's doing these almost tribal tom fills within the bar of the riff, and it's just like, what the fuck is happening in this music? I love it.
You know, these are younger dudes, probably younger than Silvanthrone, actually, looking at their Metal Archives page. I wonder if, like, you know, the key to the genius of the Norwegians, in part, was that they were squandering their expensive classical music educations on this music. These kids probably play in jazz bands. It's cool.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just looking at the, goddamn. I'm looking at the guitarist of this band. He's 18 years old. So, yes, you're correct.
Yeah, like this is American. It's the American version of that. They're probably trained in jazz or other kinds of things like that. And, you can hear it for sure, but in a non-annoying way. So, yeah, I guess let's get into my favorite part of Orbiting Fractals. What I have in my notes is, you know that noisy guitar stuff I love? Those totally unmusical sounds you could only make with an electric guitar? Right? And it's kind of just like, that is the riffing style, right? It's just, you know, they're manipulating pure energy using just touch on the fretboard, right?
Yeah.
And so let's go to about a minute after yours in Orbiting Fractals, and get ready for the lobotomy continues.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, this is...
That's brilliance.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And, I know exactly what is going to happen when people hear this shit. Like...
Oh, God, I do too. You're right, yes.
Well, I mean, the vast majority of people are just going to say this is fucking, like, horrible shit. But clearly a segment like that evidences, like, the brilliance at the core of this music, you know?
I could also see really annoying people getting into it for the wrong reasons, i.e., oh, it's so progressive, right?
Yeah, but because they'll totally discount the fact that it's, like, incredibly brutal.
Yeah, no, what the most complex thing happening there was the elemental, like, you said Meshuggah, yeah, the elemental chug riff sort of slowly mutating and changing rhythmic shapes for the entire passage. And they only got to a, standard chug riff right as we faded out, and they were about to hit you with just the most crushing, like, Winter into Darkness riff on the record.
Well, it's funny because it's also like the very end is like that could also be like a Waking the Cadaver riff, but it's so removed from its original context.
Well, a thing these guys have that Anal Stab Wound also had, and that these guys just take to a way more avant-garde extreme, is they're young enough that they have the primordial fascination that we all heard when we heard the angry chugging guitar, right? They're still young enough to remember that, and yet they're familiar
cool
with
on its own.
Yes, and they're familiar. I'm sure they know a shit ton of bands now, and they are great musicians. But they're still tapped into that primordial feeling, and they don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks about how it's supposed to sound. Like
it's,
to me, the highlight, the peak of this album is about 20 seconds into that sample, where the guitars start sort of crying, doing one of those down swoops again, like wow, chung, wow, chung, and then the weed whacker goes off in the background. In the other channel, it's like a weed whacker or a leaf blower, just ring. And the first time I heard that, I was like, I've been waiting for someone to do this my whole life.
I mean, it's after so many. I mean, I've talked about this on the show a couple of times, but after so many years of listening to this music and listening to very bizarre experimental music, it's so exciting when I encounter something that takes me aback with how fucking weird it is. And honestly, I have no predictions to make about this band or this EP. I don't know what you could pull from this, and incorporate as technique in another band. I don't know where this band will go, because they say, on the Bandcamp, this is just a fragment of what we're going to be releasing later this year, and I'm like, are they going to be able to do a full length that's as weird and brilliant as this? I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see, but What
if they just kept doing these things, but for 50 minutes?
Oh, man. Well, that would probably be one of the albums of the year, then.
Yeah.
Just because it's... What makes this so wonderful is how singular it is. Mm-hmm. We've given these kind of meta descriptions, like Black Mass Vobsu, Ride for Revenge, Infestor, etc., but it doesn't actually capture what this sounds like, which is, I gotta say, basically wholly unique within death metal. And I can't fucking believe that there's still bands who can do that,
Yeah, the most original bands, right, are always speaking not only to the origin points of their own genres, but to they're speaking outside genre, to this other group of bands that are just sort of fundamental in this bigger way, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, one reason I know I respect this immensely is that I keep referring to my favorite bands, right? It's like Amoebics, another band that's kind of outside music, right? Or kind of talking to bands that are outside the little niche of crust punk that came off it. It's also talking to the Stooges, talking about, like that weed whacker sound is like
that is the initial impulse of punk. Was there's a primitive version of the Stooges when they were just playing shows, and it was a little more like they didn't totally have the concept yet. It was a little bit more like a sort of hippie freak happening thing, and they would bring vacuum cleaners on the stage and things like that. And Iggy Pop said he was inspired in part by the sound of power tools and machinery growing up.
Yeah.
And
I dig that.
Dude, I mean, have you ever had this experience? I've had this experience all the time where I hear this amazing, like, music, and I'm like, where is that coming from? And I, like, run upstairs or run out the door, and it turns out to be power tools.
Oh, no, yeah. I've heard bizarre, perfect harmonic tones emerge from air conditioners and stuff. You know, I love that, yeah.
So this is wonderful, because this is like, you hear that great noise and you say, what is that? That's horrible. And you run out the door and it's just three kids jamming in their garage, right?
These guys managed to recreate the experience of listening to power tools, but with intentional music, which is a triumph. Absolutely.
In some sense, it's come full circle, right?
Yeah, it is. And, you know, lest anyone get the wrong idea about this, we're not saying this ironically. This is truly brilliant and cool music, and I'm so excited to hear what they do after this.
Yeah, man, this is another one of those, you know, the Devilgroth is like this too, but this is another one of those, you know, sort of, oh, good, all right, everything is going according to plan.
Thank God there's still kids doing this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, you know, hopefully this starts a new genre, right? You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Abstract fucking, like, nothing death metal is fucking, I am totally down for that, so.
The people their age won't, my guess is that people their age or older won't pick up on it. It will be kids, it will be people who are 13 now who hear this and think it's cool.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are reconstructing Mayhem's Death Crush through completely different tools here.
That's a good point.
And thank God we're here to hear it. So, outstanding music. Take a quick break. Get to our final record of the night.
Hey, it's Kari from Sepulchre Curse.
And I'm Jakob.
You're listening to Terminus.
All right. Final album of the night, Devilgroth with Svyatogor. At the time of recording, we have just crossed midnight into the 7th of February, and I am willing to say right now that this will be quite possibly on both of our end of the year lists.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it'd be hard to we do 20. It'd be hard to imagine this not being on there, and I don't think it would be number 20.
No, this is a completely outstanding record. It has reference points to stuff that we already love, but it takes it in a direction that is almost difficult to imagine. I'm not even sure how to begin describing it, apart from imagine taking Branacald to its final logical conclusion of becoming purely abstracted nature music, divorced of any idea of heavy metal and really most ideas of black metal. It is entirely singular. Honestly, there's really no comparison available for this music.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like, I mean, I think the cool thing about this is that it finds a territory that existed in, like, in the weaves of fate, in the sort of worlds, in possible futures, right? Possible future trajectories. This clearly existed, and now we know it had to exist. But this guy saw it, right? He sort of, like, now that we can see, okay, so it seems like what he did, right? Yeah, it's like it's coming from Branacald pushed further. There are these other really weird
marginal Blazebirth Hall bands like Votan Solve or what's the other one? Raven Dark.
Yeah.
And, you know, those were very out there, very not heavy metal, black metal really only in the sense that they were, you know, storming and propulsive and dark, right? And this is kind of like that for sure. He has a real mastery of that school of black metal. He's listened seriously to it. And the unique thing is that he seems to have also listened to a lot of, like, what would be called atmospheric or post-black metal.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, post-rock itself, and probably some hardcore. But, like, the people who do that do not listen to BBH. The only other person I can think of blending those is Glush, who are also from Siberia. But Glush is much more folk-oriented, musically conservative, way closer to Druid and to Atmo Black.
Yeah.
So this is like the complete opposite of that. Like some similar ingredients, but completely opposite.
Yeah, the interpretation of those parts is taken in a completely different direction. I think the first time I described this to you when I found this record was, this is what I imagined Paysage d'Hiver to sound like.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then I got to Paysage d'Hiver, and it's like, it's not bad music by any means, but it's like, oh, it's just, it's black metal, but really elongated, you know? And
I remember being even dumber and thinking, it's black metal, but really quiet.
That's not unfair. That's not unfair, especially for the really early stuff.
Yeah, that was not what I was looking for in 2009, let me tell you.
But this is... but to compare it, on the other hand, this is very loud in a way.
Oh yeah.
This is the power behind this music is fucking unbelievable.
Oh yeah, it's dealing with the primary materials of nature, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, real quick, just because I mentioned up front at the beginning of the episode that I've probably listened to 20 albums at this point called Svyatogor. And I had never actually looked it up until I listened to this album, and I was like, oh, well, shit, I gotta figure out what Svyatogor actually is. So, for those who aren't familiar, it's difficult to describe because it seems like most of the English language resources about this are just copied from each other. But Svyatogor is a sort of fairy tale folk hero. He is a warrior giant in Russian mythology. And it's interesting because the stories about him don't seem to entail him doing a lot of fighting or doing really powerful stuff. But a lot of the stories seem to relate to his relationship to another folk hero, a human named Ilya. And so basically, Ilya encounters Svyatogor, this giant who I think he mistakes for a mountain at first. And he hits Svyatogor with his mace a few times, and Svyatogor just picks Ilya up and puts him in his pocket. And they end up conversing, and they decide to go off together as friends, as warriors, sort of barbaric warriors. But at one point, they encounter a giant stone coffin that is too large for Ilya, but the perfect size for Svyatogor. And despite Ilya's protestations, Svyatogor gets in it like he's drawn to it. And the coffin, the stone coffin, shuts on him. And there's different versions of what happens, but in essence, Svyatogor is trapped there forever, the last of the giants to die in this coffin. But in his last moments, he breathes some of his own life into Ilya, so Ilya can carry his Svyatogor's massive sword with him. So you're touching on these.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's
it seems like almost a sort of like fucking horrific Siberian Russian take on something like the Iliad. But
oh sure, well yeah, it's the same. Oh, the Iliad is woven out of the same kind of weave of folk
myth, right?
Yeah. But it's interesting just having consumed so much Russian media over the years. It's like, oh, so we're touching on these themes that seem so consistent in Russian media.
I see what you mean. Like, this is as fundamental for them as the Iliad might be for a Greek.
Yes. Because, like I said, I've listened to 20 black metal albums called Svyatogor. So it's touching on these
seen the name
themes
too.
of massiveness, but also fragility and sacrifice and inevitability of fate, which seem deeply woven into a lot of Russian movies and books and games and stuff that I've consumed over the years. And it's reflected very well. Pay attention to the cover of this record, where you see this small warrior and against these mountains, and then this giant kind of stone mountain to his right. But that mountain is actually a face. That's Svyatogor. It's not the small warrior.
Dude.
And understanding that made me understand this record better. It is about nature and inevitability and massiveness beyond what you can conceive.
There's a kind of inertia to the inorganic, right? If you talk about this titanic, Nietzsche talks about the titanic order in The Birth of Tragedy. He talks about this hypothetical sort of the Iliad being founded on memories of this sort of titanic age, the barbaric age, the pre-classical age of heroes, right? Mycenae and whatever, right? And this idea that earlier generations of gods, titans, who are like less anthropomorphized, close to the earth, and where there's this keen awareness that everything is force and everything is driven towards necessary ends, right? And it's like,
yes.
Yeah, and so he talks about, and there's sort of like benign Greek classicism, the smiling statues and all that are this kind of glorious edifice that arises from that knowledge. This is completely like, but if you go to the really old myth, like the Slavic myth or the Celtic myth or whatever, or the Vikings, there you have it. The Titanic order. Right.
This is music that reaches back to a sort of myth beyond everything.
The mountain has to retire to itself. It sees the coffin for itself, and it knows that its age is ending, and it just goes.
This is music that is the beginning and the end of time, and that sounds dramatic, but it's like it's forever music. It's eternal.
That's something it has in common with Blazebirth Hall.
Yes, Blazebirth Hall is always eternal music.
You take this flowing flux of energy, right? Swirling Siberian storm, basically. And if you really follow that flux, you start to see it cycling, and you start to see the patterns. And if you're really attuned to movement and process, you see the patterns, and once you're attuned to the patterns, you start to see eternity, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is... Yeah.
Like the greatest moments of Forrest and Brannicold are exactly like that.
So let's... Give us your sample, bro.
Dream of the Ancient Land. A song where, at this point, this is the second track on the record, I still thought that... in my mind, I thought this still might proceed like black metal.
Yeah.
I thought that it might... Because what we're going to hear here is it's a sort of break in the music, and I always expected it to come back. In a metal way, to have a triumphant return, but it doesn't. It's just icicles falling and shattering against stone forever. That's all this music is. So, let's check it out.
Slave.
lost in there, right?
Oh yeah, no, I was thinking,
halfway through that, and I thought, oh, surely, so probably the sample's coming to an end. And then I was like, oh, I'm halfway through.
No, it's like after listening, I don't even want to finish the show. I just want to like throw off my headphones and just walk into the woods and I haven't felt that from a record in so long. Like, it's so hard to, there's been so many records over the years that so many metal critics or whatever has been like, oh, this feels like a place. This feels, natural and geological. No, this actually gets at it because the thing is, the nature music that people talk about is always very friendly. Oh, the foxes are playing in the forest, and maybe there's some like sad parts, but ultimately it's all about the cycle of nature. No.
Oh, so you're thinking about people talking about like wolves in the throne room type stuff.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Yeah,
this isn't nature is not a cycle. Nature is an immutable granite brick that goes forever. There might be cycles within it, but nature itself exists in a fundamental way. And this captures that. Yeah.
This is in the inorganic. This starts from the inorganic and proceeds to the organic. It's not all nature isn't just life. This is like, as you said, icicles and rock and gravity and wind and I think the Slavic stuff has always been very tapped into that. Hate Forest as well, to the inorganic. But this especially is and beyond that, beyond nature. This is what I call, I call this like the inhuman.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with, because people always think of nature in terms of cycles of life and death, but there's also things that just don't live or die.
Yes,
there's frost and wind and rock. There are things that you cannot anthropomorphize. There's fundamental material realities. And
you
this is kind of what it's about it.
You anthropomorphize them and they look like Svyatogor.
Yeah.
They they don't act like people with people motivations. They, they put you in your pocket and then they walk towards the coffin and get in it, right?
It's the inevitability of it is what strikes me as so emotionally resonant about this music.
That makes sense, and it's funny because the music itself is always in flux, but there's such solidity underneath it. I agree with that. So, and also related to that nature thing, right, that people always say, not only is it all life, but it's all this very sort of comforting vision of life.
Yeah.
Right? It's always, we need to, we've gone astray from nature. We need to, return. We've wronged her so much. We need to return, like that Toadsetter record, which is so...
Oh, yeah, it's very,
yeah.
It's this parochial understanding of nature. It's like, nature is something that we need to take care of. Like nature is a pet.
Yes,
as though nature is not a thing that existed long before us and will exist long after our final passing.
Yeah. Nature shrugs. Yeah, exactly. And when I think of black metal that sounds like nature, I think of this stuff. Right, I think of Hate Forest, or I think of, the more, the funny thing, right, is that whole nature black metal thing, all they meant was black metal stripped of its impulse.
Yeah.
All they meant was black metal stripped of any sense of the divine, any sense of something more than human, any sense of grimness, right? It's like,
I would argue that this is
like the original Norwegian BM that was Wolves in the Throne Room was supposed to be different from. Sorry, go listen to Treldom. That's about nature.
Oh yeah, I would argue that
this is about nature.
I would argue that this is the most pagan black metal we've ever featured on our show.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different modes of it, but I basically agree. Yes, this gets this gets at the metaphysical fundaments of paganism.
Yeah, well, a thing, I mean it in terms of a thing wholly divorced from our systems of morality and our ideas of good and evil, you know?
I think all the pagan stuff it's sort of orthogonal to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have any, like, you know, emperor, or like, you know, I don't know, what's a good example? Like, Trelldom, Hades, Graveland, these things all operate by like a heroic code. You'd call it a heroic code or an honor ethic or whatever. It's all, I think it's all beyond good and evil. But this is like at the primal. I'm just nitpicking here, man, and that's just because I'm just nerdy.
No, I get it.
Yeah, I'm the pagan, right? But this is sort of at the root. This is very much at the root of that way of understanding the world. Mm-hmm. And you can have this vision of the world that's like, you know, well, it gets back to that thing of it being like more primordial than the Iliad, right? Yeah. A lot of black metal hangs out in the Iliad, which, you know, when people in the Renaissance read the Iliad, they were horrified. It hadn't been translated for them for a long. They hadn't rediscovered it for a long time. They knew the Aeneid better. When they read the Iliad, they were horrified. They were like, "My God, these people were barbarians." But like this is, and a lot of black metal hangs out in that territory, right? Sort of like crazed, god-possessed wolf warrior, whatever, right? This is before that.
Yeah, no, and I get it. Well, it's interesting even talking about it in terms of paganism, because this is like, listening to this music is much closer to, like, me as a Catholic, my understanding of God than, you know, most, Christians would traditionally suggest, which is something sort of outside of how we understand human thought. And, yes. You know, human relations to things. It is something so entirely outside of our experience that all we can hope is to attempt to translate in fragments its understanding. Like when I listen to this, when I listen to this, I get a similar feeling to when I listen to Reverum Ibmalacht, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like, Odin stealing the meat of poetry. There's plenty of weird stuff in total myth logic that makes no quote-unquote sense relative to the modern world. This is before that, right?
Yeah.
Odin stealing the myth of poetry has some sort of, it's very, you know, it's like, the gods are more personalized. There's like more, it makes more quote-unquote, pardon me, Guinness burp, sense. Guinness Extra is a significant... If you're not getting it at the bar, I think Guinness Extra is a significant improvement. Anyway, I suppose we should play my sample. We have so much to say about this. We should probably play more for them.
Sure.
Yeah, what you guys are getting is definitely Terminus After Dark. This is... this is from the beginning of the record. And this, I think I can tie into your idea about the indifference of all of this. Because this is so much of the Slav stuff is at the interface between folk music and this kind of inorganicity and alienness, right? This is way more just in the inorganic and alien. At the beginning of this record, I thought I heard, okay, there's this like pretty skillful, slightly folky version of a bog standard twinkly post-black riff. And that's what opens it. And it's like, I would describe that genre and that guitar tone as my personal enemy. So I was a little bit unsure, right, what to expect. But let's just listen to how this record opens. Let's just go from just 20 seconds from the beginning, and then we'll pause it for a sec.
Yeah, it's just like a nice post-black intro riff, you know?
Exactly, yeah. It's not like, I couldn't tell where it was going. I wasn't like, I hate this, right? I was like, okay, you know, kind of nice sounding, post-black, recognizably black metal-y. recognizably a riff, right? And so, okay, let's listen from there.
All right, let's see what happens.
Notice how that first riff doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, it's like it's there needs to be an intro, but the content of that intro is interchangeable.
Yeah, it's like, and that riff does come back, and you get one of the, right. It fades out for a minute as this sheet of guitar noise comes back in as the bass drum comes in, and then we get just the shade of a motor, Emperor style Motorhead beat. The bass, which is really important on this record, comes rumbling in, arcs up, and that melody comes back and locks in with it. There you go. That's one of the only black metal, like conventional capital B, capital M moments on the whole record. And then it's gone. And yeah, it could have been any riff. And so what I thought about is like, it's the opposite of like this, it relates to what you were saying about, nature beyond life or whatever, right? It's like, in the 19th century classical music or the Romantics or whatever, they were really into this idea of everything is life, right? Even things that don't seem to be alive is life, and life is all related to human thought and blah, 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 right? And so there's this organic quality to everything, and everything grows out of the beginning. So Beethoven, right, in the Fifth Symphony, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, right? 4 notes, right? And those 4 notes, he spits the whole symphony out of that, right? And there's something very profound there, and something you can learn about, like, plants and animals and things, right?
Yeah.
But, like, for Stravinsky, right, who you like the Rite of Spring a lot, right, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, every metalhead should listen to that. But, so apparently, when he was writing it, he flipped through the pages of a book of, archaic Russian peasant songs, basically at random. People have reconstructed this because they've seen the way the pages are dog-eared. And they've just seen, like, he appears to have opened these without even looking at the opposite pages. And just pulling these random melodic ideas and just used them as these little stems. They had a certain harmonic character to them, but what they were didn't matter at all because he was going to work on them. And, of course, the Rite of Spring, even though it's about spring, has, this geometric quality to it, right?
Oh, yeah. It's got moments of just profound fear and tension. Because, it's like, oh, spring, that's when all the animals are mating. Well, it's also when all the animals are consuming each other to fuel their own mating.
It's literally about a human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's like
Okay.
this weaving of, I think that fundamentally, there's all these stories
And a
about
Slav human sacrifice, so there you go.
Yeah, there. Well,
They're going to
there's always
stain the
these,
linden tree with the maiden's blood. It's
there's always these stories about the musical content being so fucking shocking to the people at the time that Riot started. It's probably part of that, but I think it's more to do with this sort of like intensely pagan idea of life and death being fundamentally intertwined in a way that was deeply upsetting to a lot of the Christians at the time.
Bro, I feel ya. Yes, you get it. Yes, because there was other music at that time that was like super out there. Like, nobody rioted for Schoenberg, right?
There's always been experimental music at any era. This is not a new invention, kids.
By
People
the
have been
early
doing
20th
weird shit forever.
And by the early 20th century, the bourgeois were used to being scandalized. They knew that's what artists were for. They paid to be scandalized by artists.
That's true.
But it was something with the radicalness of it, with the way it was the specific worldview being put forth. Absolutely, I think. And the other thing is, right, it worked. In some sense, it basically, he did a medal. He basically got them all,
he did.
Because the riot wasn't just them attacking the instruments, right? They were attacking the band or whatever, or asking, rioting, asking for their money back. They all started punching each other.
Yeah. Proving his point very well.
Exactly. Yeah, we got to write a spring. So I think you got that. Yeah, the point is the opening riff. I had this sort of feeling about the opening riff. Do I like this riff? Do I not? Right? Me putting it through my, autistic riff calculator. And then who cares?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your perceptions of this kind of music don't really matter.
Yeah,
at a certain
and this is
point.
just the way he handles sort of pure guitar. He's not working with riffs. He's working with pure guitar tone as his material, just sculpting sheets of sound. And it's like he just the point of the post rock influence, I think, in some sense, is just adding that glistening tone to the BBH stuff. Mm-hmm. Adding that level of sort of crisp reverb allows him to make these sort of shapes with it that you couldn't make otherwise because the BBH stuff was so fuzzy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it replaces the fuzz with this unbelievable density. It just this fucking it just warps what would have. There's probably something like black metal riffs buried in this music, but it's so blown out through delay and reverb that they're just completely abstracted forms with, these sort of ringing harmonic notes bleeding into each other, which make it completely distinct from a riff as we understand it. Which is actually a really good segue into my second sample.
Good.
Yeah, so this is off The Living Mountain. And what makes this so interesting and what makes it, I would say, I don't think it's unfair to say this is not only not black metal, it's beyond black metal. Mm-hmm. Some of the most profound moments on this record for me are where the music sort of fades into nothing. It does not resemble a song in any way that we understand it. And this is a really good passage that evidences that. So let's listen to a bit of The Living Mountain. So I'm kind of curious. This is something I've been ruminating on with this record. Do you think the drums were programmed after the guitars were written? Because they are not adhering to any sort of conventional rhythmic structure.
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinated me listening through that was just like, and through all the samples, really, is how, like, it's not like there's no sense of, you hear nods to all sorts of set rhythmic forms from metal, right? You just got a bit of a nod to a metalcore chug passage, right? You get all sorts of these ideas that come in, but then, like, just when you think you've got an idea fixed for, like, 2 measures, the emphasis changes in the guitars, and the drums keep going, but sound totally different rhythmically because the measures are starting at a different spot, and you can't count it at all.
Oh, yeah, no. Finding the one in any of these fucking songs is almost impossible.
Dude, that's a really good point, and that relates to what how you were characterizing at the beginning about eternity. And it's like, you can't find the one.
Yeah, you can't find the beginning of any of the shit.
There's definitely rhythms there, but you can't find the one. I think you're I hadn't thought about it that way, but you gotta be right. Because, like, how could you decide... How could you come up with those drum beats beforehand?
Well, yeah, because in this record, the drums are more of a textural instrument. They're not driving the music. They are not the skeleton that the music is built around. They're merely another voice in the music. They're given no greater or lesser importance than any other voice in this music, which is honestly probably a direction that certain kinds of black metal need to go, you know?
Yeah, well, we've talked about just getting stuck in standard forms, and one of those is getting locked in around, well, okay, 4 or 8 of this drum beat, right? And, you know, often the paradox is, right, often those are the bands with the least interesting drumming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I feel that. Well, you know, with the Vergeblikite we were listening to a while ago, right?
Yeah, that has very eccentric drumming on it.
It is very eccentric drumming, and also the parts are decentered. That is, like, none of them jumps out as the lead.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something like that here. I would say the guitars here clearly are leading, but the drums are definitely demoted from their role as, like, rhythmic grid.
Yeah. Yeah, which is fascinating because they're programmed drums, which is like the default is they're a rhythmic grid, but not at all here.
Which is smart, right? That's medium specific in a really interesting way. One way to deal with programmed drums is to say, we're going to be honest about the programmed drums, and I'm going to make industrial blast beat war metal, right?
Yeah.
You know, the other way to deal with it is to do something like this, I suppose, where you take advantage of the fact that you can do them in post-production and just make them up as you go.
Yeah, every stroke on the drums merely exists because it is the moment in time where that stroke makes sense. It has nothing to do with, like, establishing a rhythm for the music. It is a pure sound texture that has a purpose. Like, the cymbals, like the crash cymbals, are purely to accent certain moments of the guitar. They don't repeat. They're almost entirely random. Those were absolutely programmed after the fact. Like, the crash cymbals on this are just used as textural accents. There's no pattern to them.
I mean, how could you imagine where the bass drums would go? And you can imagine versions of these songs, at least some of them, parts that have the bass drums filled in under, and you could plot some blast beats under them or whatever, right? But, like, to imagine which parts would be filled in and which others would be left strangely blank, I think you have to do it after the fact.
Because there aren't like parts that it makes sense.
This guy is so good at unlearning, preserving many of the things that are most fundamental about black metal and just exciting heavy music in general, while unlearning so many of the preconceived constraints about it. Like, who says a double bass part has to have a snare drum? Oh, here's the snare drum, here's your Motorhead beat. Oh, there's no snare drum anymore, and now the emphasis is falling on the one. It's
so. It's
well,
so
the one
perfect.
that doesn't exist, but you know what I mean, right? Now it's a downbeat riff, right? Now it's a downbeat beat. So yeah, I mean, God, this is so cool. Yeah, and you know, I said on my notes about the Living Mountain, but we've already talked about this. Is like, yeah, this is a good example of the need to go beyond black metal. Very different approach from some of the other things we've heard, and you know, it's maybe the riff. We must overcome the riff, right?
Yeah. No, I think if there was any evidence to that, it might be this record. It's
overcome the riff out of love for the riff.
Yeah, what happens when we transcend the riff form as the fundamental unit of this music? Well, I would argue that once you do that, it's no longer black metal, and that's okay.
I would say that black metal doesn't have to be riff. I would say that black metal is more oriented toward melody than riff, which distinguishes it from death metal. However, it's definitely no longer metal, and I'm sympathetic to it no longer being black metal, just simply because when, you know, we've said this before, like, right, the American stuff, right, the outlaw rock, ding, 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 copyrighted Terminus term, is clearly different in a lot of important ways, right?
Yeah.
And also this music's been around for 30 years, and we love it to death, but come on, time to keep moving. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm pretty sympathetic to this not being black metal. It's clearly part of the tradition, and it has the spirit, but it's like, we needed, I get what you mean. You know, in some way, like, if you wanted to identify the riffs on this, okay, great, this record has 120 riffs.
Yeah, it kind of does.
You know, right, this record's 55 minutes long. There's a rate of about... No, it probably has more like 200 riffs. It's about 4 riffs per minute. Yeah, let's go to Paths of Wisdom. And for my lead-in, it's just listen for the kind of abstracted hardcore stuff, which suggests he's not just stuck in the, you know, cult black metal silo. Listen to the bass, which we've already talked about, which is very simple but extremely important. And, you know, also just, okay, I'll be the guy. I'll pick the big climactic moment.
I'm intrigued to hear this because, like, this is not a record with peaks and valleys the way we understand them.
No, this is just like the one thing that's close to it, and probably the one thing that's close to like a epic release in the way you'd normally conceive of it in black metal.
That's fair.
All right.
Holy shit, man. Like, the fucking... One thing I feel like I have to say is, like, the samples of this do not do it justice. This has to be taken as a whole. The weight and the scope of this music are... and a crucial part of it. And... real quick, I need to read the lyrics to this song, Paths of Wisdom, because they're perfect.
All right.
The English is a little spotty in a couple places, but
as it should be.
Yes, as it should be. But if you like black metal, or if you love black metal like we do, you should get it. So it goes. The forest became silent soon, letting all the creatures to fall asleep. The moon always watches it, and the soul always wants to go back there. But we can't bring the past back. The old paths were covered with snow. The giant is dead for a long. His body became a mountain, so the trees grow on it. So we will also become soil and ashes. The hero left a legacy for us, but we no longer can't understand it. I want to stay here to listen to the wind forever. Fuck.
Just cut the show there.
You think so?
Yeah, just cut the show there.